Coming soon in Dubai. We promise, we deliver. BT Properties. Stay tuned. Call now 800-50-555.
When you're looking for printer cartridges,
look up Print 3000. Experience top-notch printing solution at our location. Visit us at 5285 Tromkin Road, Mississauga, Ontario. For all your printer cartridges needs, contact Shafkat Opal at 905-267-3000 for expert assistance. Quality cartridges, reliable service. Your printing satisfaction is our priority.
Your printer requires this toner.
for good customer service, fast delivery, and unbeatable prices, you have to come to Print 3000. बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम दोस्तों। इस उम्मीद के साथ आप सब खैरियत से होंगे। दोस्तों, आज आपके लिए एक खास प्रोग्राम लेकर आए हैं। हम ज़्यादातर प्रोग्राम इंग्लिश ज़ुबान में करेंगे और उसकी वजह आपको समझ आ जाएगी। और मुझे लगता है कि ये प्रोग्राम बहुत अहम है। मैं ज़ाती तौर पे इसके बारे में बात करूँ तो आई फील वेरी इमोशनल टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस। आई फील दैट वी नीड टू बी एजुकेटेड अबाउट दिस सब्जेक्ट। आई फील दैट दिस टॉपिक needs to be discussed in detail so people can talk about it and take it to their administrative. Ji haan, I am going to talk about the issue of Gaza, and I have a very special guest with me today who is very knowledgeable about the subject. In the studio, I have with me Rabbi David Mivasair, if I pronounce his name right. He's in the studio with me. Rabbi has worked with I read about Rabbi, and he has lived in Israel. He has worked with people for the cause of Israel, and now he is working individually. I will ask Rabbi about the organization he's working with now. Welcome to the studio, Rabbi. How are you?
Thank you so much.
First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time out and speak to us today. Can you talk a little bit about yourself and let the people know what you're working on and the organization you're working with right now?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. So it may be obvious, but I want to say it. I'm Jewish.
Yes.
I'm a Jew. And when I was a young person, I got very, very interested in religion.
Okay.
Very inspired and attracted to religion. And I decided I wanted to work with Jewish people and develop our religion and help people learn about it and live it and, you know, live a good Jewish religious life. So that is going back maybe 50 years or more. And I worked as a rabbi in synagogues for about 25 years, and now I'm retired. I'll say a little bit more that may just inform people about me. Also, when I was way younger, like a teenager, we're talking about in the 1960s, I got very interested in the idea of a Jewish country, like the Jewish people live together in a Jewish country and speak our language, live in our culture, celebrate our holidays, develop our people, you know, and I got very, very interested. And from that time, I was a Zionist, and I'm saying that in the past tense.
Okay.
So
that's very important.
For most of my life, maybe 40 years or more, I was what I would call a liberal Zionist. And when I say Zionist, that means I really believed there should be a Jewish country for the Jewish people, you know, and that should be our ancient homeland that we can call Israel or Palestine. It's the same place.
Right.
That's a Zionist. And liberal Zionist means I always cared about the Palestinian people. I didn't want them to be hurt. I didn't want any injustice against them. I wanted them to be treated with equality, and, you know, so that's like a liberal Zionist. Okay, I'm a Zionist, but hey, we have to be proper about it and not hurt the Palestinians, you know. So I was active for decades with Zionist groups that are trying to go in that direction. And then, honestly, in less than the last 10 years, I had to reevaluate that.
Okay.
I feel like my understanding of the whole history of Zionism and the creation of the state of Israel has shifted so that now, just the last few years, I have a kind of clarity that I need to be anti-Zionist and oppose the idea of a Jewish state for Jewish people. And yeah, the other people can live there and we have to be nice to them. That's wrong. So I'm actually like embarrassed to say that it took me so long to figure that out.
I'm really interested to know what triggered that change in you. But before that,
let me add something
please,
else.
Please go ahead.
You asked about the organization
yes,
that I'm active with. So I just want to say that to the people who are watching. So in Canada, there's an organization called Independent Jewish Voices that we started about 16 years ago. It has a few thousand members who are Jews who live all across Canada, from like Halifax to Victoria, and we are anti-Zionist Jews, and we are very committed and devoted to showing up in support of Palestinians in their struggle for their existence in their land. And we do that here in Canada. We speak up, we show up, and we do a lot as Jews to support Palestinians.
Okay, that's very interesting. You guys are doing good work, and good to know about this organization. I'm pretty sure the viewers would like to know more about this organization, and I'm pretty sure they can look up on Google as well.
Yeah, I'll just say really simply, if you want, you can find
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
You just go online, ijvcanada.org.
ijvcanada.org. Please visit that website and know more about the organization.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Rabbi, I want to ask a question. And I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of content on social media, content with a lot of theories. What is happening in that region? Why is that happening? And part of the theories, which I am going to turn into a question, which I'm really curious about myself. I've been student of stories of prophet, and stories of prophets are very similar in monotheistic religion, at least. The predictions of future comes to take part in play, and it says in Judaism there is a prophet, a leader, a savior who's going to come and lead the world from Jerusalem. That's the theory, and people are saying that is why they want to make sure that they grab that land so their leader can come and lead from there and enforce it, and that's why this cruelty is happening. That's one of the theory. What do you have to say about that?
So that is an idea,
yes,
that some Jewish people hold on to, right?
Okay.
And the usual word for that in English is a Messiah.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
But there are so many different kinds of ideas in Judaism, and so many different ways that Jewish people believe, that I would say that's one among many. Right? And it's a very, some people take that in a literal way. They actually believe there's actually going to be a person who will come and who will change the world, and they see that as a kind of universalistic thing. It'll be good for everyone, right? But they see that in very literal terms, right? And I understand it, and I think most thinking believers in Judaism understand it much more in kind of symbolic or poetic terms, and it's a way to say that one day in the future, if all people in the world shift their consciousness and start living differently, we can live in a world of peace and justice and love and generosity, and all of us can get along. We can take care of the poor and the sick and the, the orphans and the widows, right? That in some strands of Judaism or some streams in Judaism, that got turned into a belief in like kind of like a supernatural magical person that's going to come and like they're going to make that happen,
fix everything, all the world problems.
It's like a magical thinking, and to me, I think that's actually very simplistic and almost like childish to think there's going to be a person's going to come and magically fix everything. No,
Okay.
but to say that the world can be fixed,
Mhm.
yeah, that's what inspires me. Otherwise, why would I try doing everything? Just give up.
But again, I'm just adding on to it. So from the stories of Prophet Moses, Exodus, and it says that it is the promised land. I think all monotheistic religion, it is a holy land from them, that specific area in Jerusalem. So then the question arises about the temple. Of course, Prophet Solomon had the temple built. I don't know if the stories are exactly the same, but that's the idea, right?
Yeah.
It's been destroyed twice. There's also another theory that I think you answered the question already, but I'm just adding on to it. The third temple needs to be built for all the prophecies to come true.
That is according to certain strands within Judaism, right? I assume your listeners are mostly Muslims.
Right.
So within Islam, how many different stories are there? Different sects, different interpretations. They compete with each other. They disagree with each other, right? So that idea, yeah, that's there. Some people believe it.
Okay.
But again, I would say the same thing. It's a very simplistic, concrete interpretation of things that are hinted at. There's nowhere in the Bible where it says that there's going to be a third temple. That's nowhere in the Bible. I think that comes up for people. Centuries ago. There was a second temple, and that second temple was destroyed by the Romans. So to say there will be a third temple, it's like giving people hope. If your people are in exile, right, and you're oppressed, a way to like kind of poetically, symbolically have hope is to say, one day, we'll go back home. Our temple will be rebuilt. But I want to add some really, truly religious perspective on that.
Please.
That actually comes from the prophets. And if even, first of all, I want to point out, you mentioned that Solomon had it built, the first temple.
David.
In the Bible, his father, David wanted to build a house for God.
Yeah.
And God said to him, I don't know what's in the Quran or in the
It's pretty much the same
Islamic tradition. God said, no, you may not build my house because of the blood on your hands. So just listen to that. So how could you possibly have a third temple, which I think that's completely symbolic. It's not actually building a third temple. But even if it was, how can you build a third temple when God says to David, you may not build my house because you have blood on your hands? What's Israel doing today? How did Jews get control of that place? It's all because of blood on their hands. That's one point I want to make. Another point I want to make is that's
in the Bible. That's in Judaism.
Read it right there in the Bible, the same Bible that the Christians have and the Jews have. Exactly, right there. You can just look in the Bible. That's what it says, and that's why David couldn't build it, and that's why his son Solomon did. Okay. Anyway, I think that's very important.
Okay.
And you hear me saying, I think it's very important not to get attached to literal interpretations of things in the Bible that are not meant literally. They're meant poetically or symbolically. But all the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Micah, Ezekiel, I can name more of them, all of them are clear that God's giving that land to the Jews, when you talk about the promised land, conditionally. The Jews need to live a godly life. The Jews need to live in a society. They make a just society. no oppressing the poor, no taking advantage of people, right? You have to care for each other. You have to care for the strangers, right? It says right in the Torah, one law for the strangers and yourselves, because, that's just. And all the prophets were saying, you talk about like prophecy in the sense of telling the future, they were all saying, if you continue to live the way you're living now, God's going to throw you out. The land will vomit you out because what you're doing. And that's what happened.
Okay.
So to think that somehow that land like belongs to the Jews and the Jews should take it back, and somehow that's going to bring the Messiah, that's all completely backwards.
Opposite. Okay.
For us to bring the Messiah, again, I mean that symbolically, we need to live a godly life. We need to be kind and generous and loving and patient and just. Okay. And that will bring the Messiah. Now, I want to just say one more thing.
Sure.
The best teaching I know about the Messiah is that the Messiah will be here when we no longer need him.
Okay. That's interesting take. Yep. All right. We're running out of time. I have a lot of questions, so I am going to ask.
You're the boss.
We're going to try to keep it a little brief.
Yeah.
The question I really think is important now after hearing this, then can I say that all Jews are not Zionist, but all Zionist, other way around? No, that's not true either.
No,
right?
no, no.
So please, can you clarify what's the difference between Judaism and
certainly not all Jews are Zionists.
Okay.
Many Jews are either anti-Zionist, which takes a lot of thinking to get to that point in this time, because there's so much propaganda, so much indoctrination.
But that's what I'm saying, because of the ideology of State of Israel around the globe, it's thought that all Jews are in part and parcel of that process.
They want people to think that, but it's certainly not true.
Okay.
And if you go back, like when I was growing up, most Jews were not Zionists. They didn't think about it. It wasn't part of their life. My mother and father weren't interested in that. My grandparents weren't interested in that,
So what's the
You
difference
mentioned
between
that I lived there.
Yeah,
I lived
I
there
did. Yeah.
4 years. My parents never even came to visit. They didn't want to go there. It wasn't interesting for them. They're happy where they were. And so Jews have lived in other countries literally for thousands of years.
Okay. Sorry, I'm very curious.
Go ahead.
I'm interrupting. So
Yeah.
when you said you lived there, and you mentioned that you were part of that ideology.
I was.
What changed? And I really want my viewers to know what is the difference between Zionism and Judaism.
Okay. All right. We got a few things to talk about.
Sorry, sure.
I want to provide the other half of the answer of what you said before.
Okay.
So certainly not all Jews are Zionists. I just want to break that down to some Jews are Zionists. Some Jews, like I said, are anti-Zionists. And many Jews are simply not Zionists. They're not anti. They're not. It's just not like an important thing to them. They're living their life wherever they are. Right. So I just want to say that. And then the other thing that you almost said is, all Zionists are Jews? No. Most Zionists are not Jews. They're actually Christians. They're evangelical Christians. The largest Zionist organization in the world is actually, most Zionists are not even Jews.
Okay.
The beginning of Zionism was in England and in Germany by actually anti-Semites who wanted to get the Jews out of their countries. So, let's have a Jewish country. Let's send the Jews to Palestine or anywhere, right?
Right.
And today, the biggest Zionist organization that's very influential is called Christians United for Israel in the US. It has millions of members. Talking to a Canadian audience here, we just remember one of the fiercest Zionists, Stephen Harper, not Jewish. His foreign minister, John Baird, not Jewish.
A strong lobby here.
I'm just making a point, right? There's many, many non-Jews who somehow they think they're doing us a favor by being Zionist. No, thank you. So that's just to answer that. And then you were asking me about
what triggered for you to change.
Yeah,
that's very important, because
I'll tell you very specifically.
Yeah.
So as I said, I was like a liberal Zionist or progressive Zionist or humanistic Zionist,
Mhm.
didn't want to hurt the Palestinians. And I read a very brief book called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, written by a historian who's Israeli. He was born and raised in Israel.
Mhm.
He was a professor at University of Haifa
Mhm.
named Ilan Pape.
Okay.
And the book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, when I read it, it like blew me away. It had so many historical facts about how Israel came to be, like just stealing land and driving people off their land, that I couldn't deny it. I could no longer maintain the dynamic called cognitive dissonance.
Right.
Cognitive dissonance is when there's two different ideas that are in conflict with each other, and in your brain, you suppress one of them so you can believe the other one. So I think in my life, for 40 or 50 years, I knew about the Nakba. I saw with my own eyes destroyed houses and places where Palestinians had been driven out. I knew that, undeniable. But another part of my brain wanted to believe the Jews are good people, and the Jews deserve a country of their own, So I suppressed that. And really, that book was like a turning point for me. I just say there's another book I read that this is less than 10 years ago. It's called State of Terror by a writer in England named Thomas Suarez. And it's completely documented acts of terror by Zionists against Palestinians in the 1930s and 1940s. Things I did not know, So after reading these things, and everything I saw through all those years, I like to have integrity with myself. I had to shift, and that was very difficult.
That's very noble of you.
Very, very difficult. I don't know if it's noble. It's just like, if you know something's true, you just have to act on it.
I've been taught to believe that you always can learn something new from someone, and when you accept that, you don't have to be stubborn about your ideology. You can always learn something new, and that's very important in any human being. Anyways, we're running out of time. Let me try to ask you some one-liner questions. You talk about anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And is talking about Israel or talking about them, like last week killing over 200 people, most of them children.
Over 400.
Over 400 people, sorry. And half of them or more were children. Is that anti-Semitic in any way?
Absolutely not. Of course not. No.
So what is anti-Semitic?
So anti-Semitism is negative attitudes or hate or animus against Jews because they're Jews.
Okay.
There are people in the world that just hate Jews.
Okay.
That's anti-Semitism. It's mostly irrational. It's
Okay.
very damaging, right? But criticizing Israel or being realistic and honest about Israel, that's not anti-Semitic. It could be anti-Semitic if you blame all the Jews in the world for Israel,
right?
Because not all the Jews in the world are responsible for Israel, even though they want to make it look like we are, right? So it's very important for people to be real and honest about Israel, and to do everything we can to stop Israel.
I have a smirky smile on my face because I believe, and it's not a question rather than a comment, I believe that the terminology anti-Semitic is being used politically to protect what Israel is doing.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Sure.
All right.
It's a trick. It's like manipulative. That's what it is.
It's manipulative.
And so many politicians fall for it.
Okay. All right. Last few quick questions. And sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned Judaism and Zionism.
Yeah.
So let me just say briefly.
Sure. Briefly. That's very important.
So Judaism is a religion, and it's a religion that has its roots in the Bible. It goes back 3,000 years. And like any religion, it's about how to live a good, moral, ethical life. And it's about how to relate to God, whatever God is, transcendent, holy. brought us into this world, keeps us alive every day. You know, it's about even like building community, and it's about celebrating the passages of life, like birth and marriage. And, you know, it's like, I think all religions do that. In Judaism, you use the word noble.
Right.
It is truly a very noble religion. And I think, like any religion, it has changed through the years. You know, every generation does things a little different, right? That's Judaism. Zionism is a political ideology that began in the very late 1800s, about, say, 130 or 140 years ago. It's a political ideology that says that the Jews should live in that land, not live in other lands. And then that developed into the Jews should have their own state, their own country. In the beginning of Zionism, it wasn't even clear that that's what they're saying, but now that's it. So just to repeat, Judaism is a religion. It's a very valid, beautiful, holy, wonderful religion that has actually been occupied by Zionism, taken over by Zionism, and very distorted by Zionism. And I hope and pray to God that it's not completely ruined by Zionism, and we can redeem our religion from this political ideology that's really taken it over.
Okay. Thank you, David. I'm still contemplating if I should call you Rabbi or David, but let's stick with both. I'm going to keep switching the names.
It doesn't matter.
Last few quick questions. What in Canada can people do to help people of Gaza? Because
that's
it's
so important.
It's extreme. I don't even have a heart to see what's happening on social media. Sometimes I'm not able to sleep for days.
I know.
So what can we do, in your opinion?
So I'm going to say quickly, first, do something. Do anything. Do something. All this talk doesn't do anything unless you take some action. So I want to say, I want to just say two things. So one, give money to help support people that are so deprived. And there are many, many organizations. I'll mention a few of them. I'm not favoring one over another. I'm not saying one is better than another. But the first one I think of is Islamic Relief Canada. I think they do great work, especially here in the GTA. There's many good ones.
Yeah.
Droplets of Mercy. There's one I think called IDRF that is very involved in providing water. There's Medical Aid for Palestine. There's many, many, many organizations. If you can't find one, you know, call Salman. He'll help you find one.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Give money. Something I have done is I've created like a network of people just helping individual families in Gaza. We send them money, like a few $100s to this woman with 3 children and lost her husband. You know, a few $100s to this person, right, to help them on a daily basis. So that, again, give money. That actually is a very concrete thing we can do. And the second thing is be active politically.
That's very important.
That is so important. Our politicians are mostly very shameful. I think they're captive of the Zionist lobby. And every politician has to respond to the people, right? If they see and hear enough support for Palestine and enough clarity about it from the people, the voters, they'll get on board with it. I think we're seeing that in some ways. I could be more specific about individual MPs that are starting to speak out more, you know, to just we're leading up to another federal election. Make Palestine part of your vote, part of what you communicate
part of
about.
a federal issue, yeah. That's
and I'll just say there's like an active thing called votepalestine.ca. And if you're interested in mobilizing politically, go online to votepalestine.ca and apply that to your riding, to the candidates who want your vote, you know, and just help financially. Right now, that's what they need. And do anything you can politically. And don't be afraid to speak out. You know, you talk about anti-Semitism. Don't be afraid of being accused of being anti-Semitic. Maybe look in your heart. Are you anti-Semitic? Do you hate Jewish people? No. say the truth about Israel and Palestine. Be real, be active, don't be silent.
Thank you, David. I think, and it's news to me. I heard that yesterday. I couldn't find much about it. This is the last question I'm going to ask. This is specifically for Canadian audience, people living in Canada, that there's real estate deals happening in the houses, in the properties which people of Palestine or people of Gaza are forced to leave in synagogues here. Is that true? Can you tell us a little bit about it, and what's your opinion? What's your take on it?
Oh, so what you're talking about are real estate sales in the US, especially. It's not just Canada, but also in the GTA, very specifically in Thornhill in Toronto, that have been held actually in synagogues because it gives them cover and they can kind of hide in a religious building, right? So these are real estate agents, they're businesses.
Right.
The real estate agents, developers,
is it even
lawyers.
legal to do that?
So that needs to be tested by lawyers. There are lawyers. I could get into that if you want.
Okay.
So what's going on is these are real estate companies that are selling properties. Some of them are in Israel proper, meaning before 67. And some of these properties are in the West Bank. And they're stolen property. And if you want to learn more about that, we'll have to find a way to get information to people, but maybe just Google it and you'll find about it. Just Google like Israel real estate sales Toronto, and it's ongoing. In other words, every few months, maybe a few times a year, there's an event like this. These events are held very closely. They're covered up. They even say this is a private, closed event. They don't disclose where it is. They've been at a synagogue that's called Beth Avraham Yosef of Toronto, which is at 613 East Clark Avenue in Thornhill. And a really insidious thing is that last year, March 7th last year, we had an enormous protest against this. And then after the protest, the mayor of Vaughan, which includes Thornhill, initiated a measure in the city council to ban protests at houses of worship because we don't want, we shouldn't bother people in their house of worship, but really this has nothing to do with worship. This is criminal activity taking place in a building that at other times it's used for religious purposes. But what I'm saying is this mayor named Stephen Del Duca just completely, was subservient to the Zionist lobby, passed a bill banning protests at houses of worship, and then that spread to Toronto. But it's now in the Oakville City Council, where I live in Hamilton. It's come to Hamilton, and this is all provoked by Zionist lobby in Canada to suppress people talking about what's really going on. They don't want us to talk about it.
But you're claiming that it started because the protest happening outside of synagogue there.
That's it.
Okay, and now it's spreading.
Thank you for asking about that. That's one particular element, and it's indicative of the kind of subservience of Canadian politicians to the Zionist lobby. And I say politicians, but also other institutions, universities, hospitals, even libraries. Last week in Belleville, Ontario, the public library canceled an event where people arranged to use a room in the public library for a discussion with doctors who had been to Gaza, and they were coming back and they were going to talk about the medical situation of people in Gaza. The CEO of the Belleville Library thought, oh, this is controversial. We have to cancel it before it happens. That's called obeying in advance. That's how fascism spreads. There's so... you asked me before, what can people in Canada do? And my answer was, do anything. Do something. Don't be silent. Don't just think about it. Do whatever you can do.
Do your part.
And what you can do depends on you. Who are you?
Everyone has
if you're a teacher, do something in your school. You know, if you're a librarian, do something in your library. Whatever, do whatever you can do.
Thank you so much, David. I know we run out of time, and I can confess very easily the time wasn't enough. I think we should do more of these if time allows you, and we should continue talking about it. We should continue educating people about the issue and why it's happening and why innocent lives are being taken.
Yeah, it's horrible. So sure, thank you. I'm saying do what you can do. So you, Salman, you've created this program. You're talking about substantive, meaningful things. You know, you're like inviting people into engagement. So you found what you can do, and
For sure.
everybody can do something that's going to make a difference.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank
you
you.
for having. Thank you for joining me
Thank
today.
you.
नाजरीन, ये था पहला पार्ट आज के शो का फेस द फैक्ट्स विद सलमान। ब्रेक के बाद वापस आएंगे और हमारे साथ एक और मेहमान मौजूद होंगे। उनका तारुफ मैं आपको उस वक्त भी करवाऊंगा, मुर्तजा जोया साहब, जो यहाँ पे पाकिस्तानी कम्युनिटी में जो गजा के लिए, फलस्तीन के लिए काम कर रहे हैं, उनसे भी बात करेंगे और उनसे पाकिस्तानी कम्युनिटी के लिए मैसेज लेंगे कि हम क्या कर सकते हैं, हमने क्या क्या किया है और आगे क्या कर सकते हैं। फिलहाल चलते हैं एक ब्रेक की तरफ, मिलते हैं कुछ देर बाद।
The air above Gaza screams with the roar of fighter jets. Once again, the beleaguered strip is engulfed in flames and smoke. Operation Strength and Sword, the Israeli military calls it. Strength against whom? A sword against what? Over 500 Palestinians, many of them children, have been brutally erased from this world. This is not a war, it is a massacre. The world watches, seemingly powerless to stop this cycle of violence. Gaza, once a vibrant tapestry woven with threads of culture, history, and resilience, now lies shredded, its beauty marred by the deep wounds of conflict. The landscape, once dotted with bustling markets and lively cafes, is now scarred with craters and littered with debris. The air, thick with the acrid stench of smoke and decay, whispers tales of unimaginable suffering. Through the dust and despair, the survivors emerge, their faces etched with trauma, their eyes reflecting the horrors they have witnessed. Families huddle together amidst the ruins, their homes reduced to rubble, their lives shattered beyond recognition. The lucky ones, if they can be called that, have escaped with only the clothes on their backs, their pasts buried under the weight of loss and displacement. The physical destruction is only half the story. The psychological scars run deep, invisible to the naked eye but ever present in the haunted eyes of the survivors. The constant fear of death, the agonizing uncertainty of the future, the unbearable weight of loss. These are the burdens they carry, heavier than any bomb, more crippling than any physical wound. Amidst the rubble and despair, a particularly heart-wrenching scene unfolds. Children, their innocence shattered by the relentless bombardment, line up with empty stomachs and pleading eyes, desperate for a morsel of food, a drop of clean water. Their small bodies, already weakened by years of siege and deprivation, are now pushed to the brink of survival. Hospitals, once sanctuaries of healing, have become targets themselves. The wounded seeking refuge from the bombs are met with fresh horrors as the very places meant to mend their broken bodies are torn apart. The sick and the injured lie side by side, their moans of pain competing with the chilling symphony of destruction outside. The most vulnerable, the elderly, and the infants cling precariously to life, their fragile bodies ill-equipped to withstand this man-made catastrophe. The very air they breathe is thick with the stench of fear. Every shadow, every sudden noise sends shivers down their spines. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful and shallow, punctuated by nightmares of falling bombs and crumbling buildings. These children, robbed of their childhoods, their innocence stolen by the horrors of war, are the most tragic victims of this conflict. They are the walking, breathing indictment of a world that has failed to protect them, a world that has turned a blind eye to their suffering. Looking at the images coming out of Gaza, a chilling question arises. Is humanity losing to evil? Have we become so desensitized to suffering that we can witness such atrocities without feeling empathy? The world stands at a crossroads. One path leads to more suffering, the other to justice and peace. The choice is ours. The future of humanity hangs in the balance.
वेलकम बैक नाजरीन। अब मेरे साथ मौजूद हैं वो मेहमान जिनसे हम बात करेंगे कि पाकिस्तानी डायस्पोरा, पाकिस्तानी कम्युनिटी कनाडा में बैठे हुए غزہ کی، فلسطین کے لوگوں کی کیسے مدد کر سکتی ہیں، کیسے پاکستانی کمیونٹی ماضی میں مدد کرتی رہی ہے اور آگے کا کیا پلان ہے، چاہے وہ مدد کرنے کے حوالے سے ہو، چاہے وہ پولیٹیکل لابنگ کے حوالے سے ہو۔ میرے ساتھ اسٹوڈیو میں موجود ہیں میرے بڑے پیارے دوست جو کسی تعارف کے محتاج نہیں ہیں، بہت کام کر رہے ہیں کمیونٹی میں، چاہے وہ اپنے شہر تک ہو، پورے جی ٹی میں ہو اور پوری کمیونٹی کے لیے ہو۔ مرتضیٰ جویا صاحب میرے ساتھ اسٹوڈیو میں موجود ہیں۔ السلام علیکم مرتضیٰ بھائی، کیسے ہیں آپ؟
وعلیکم السلام سلمان بھائی، شکریہ آپ کا، آپ نے ہمیں یہ موقع دیا۔
مرزا بھائی، سب سے پہلے آپ موجود تھے جب رابی ڈیوڈ ہم سے بات کر رہے تھے، تو کافی جذباتی ٹاپک ہے جب بھی ہم بات کرتے ہیں فلسطین کے حوالے سے۔ مجھے ذاتی طور پہ کبھی کبھی ایسے لگتا ہے کہ میں بہت لاچار ہوں اور میں کوئی مدد نہیں کر سکتا۔ آپ کیا کہیں گے اس کے بارے میں؟
دیکھو جی، ہر بندہ مدد کر سکتا ہے، ہر بندہ اپنی کیپاسٹی کے مطابق کچھ نہ کچھ کر سکتا ہے۔ میں دعا دیتا ہوں ڈیوڈ کو یا ان جیسے جو ہیں، مطلب بینگ ہم لوگ وہ مسلم بھی نہیں ہیں، اور ان کی جو کنٹریبیوشن ہے، ان کی جو آواز ہے، جس طریقے سے وہ نڈر ہو کر بتا کے گئے سچائی کو، ہم پتہ نہیں کیوں ڈرتے ہیں۔ ہمیں بھی ایسی آواز اٹھانی چاہیے، کم از کم ہم لوگ آواز تو اٹھا سکتے ہیں۔
بالکل صحیح ہے۔ تو کیوں آپ کو ہم جب سیاسی حوالے سے بھی بات کرتے ہیں، اور یہ باتیں ہیں تھوڑی سخت ہیں، آگے الیکشن بھی آنے والا ہے، بہت زیادہ ہمارے ممبر آف پارلیمنٹیرین بھی جو مسلمان ہیں وہ بھی بیک فٹ پہ نظر آئے۔ ابھی پچھلے دنوں میں نے دیکھا کچھ ایم پیز کی ویڈیوز، ایک اچھا سائن ہے کہ ایم پیز بات کر رہے ہیں فلسطین میں، غزہ میں ہونے والے مظالم کے بارے میں، لیکن اتنی بڑی طاقت ہونے کے باوجود پارلیمنٹ میں بات نہ کرنا، تو کیا کر سکتے ہیں پاکستانی کمیونٹی اس میں کیا کر سکتی ہیں؟
دیکھو جی، اگین میں وہی بات کروں گا، بات ساری ہے جرت کی۔ وہ ہمارے جتنے ایم پیز ہیں ماشاءاللہ سے کافی مقدار میں ہیں اور بڑے اچھے بولڈ ہیں، بہت نے انہوں نے آواز بھی اٹھائی ہے، لیکن میں کہوں گا کہ اس سے مطلب زیادہ آواز اٹھانی چاہیے۔ شروع میں بگننگ میں بالکل آپ صحیح کہہ رہے ہیں کہ تھوڑے پیچھے تھے، لیکن اب میں نے دیکھا جتنے بھی ہمارے پاکستانی ہیں اسپیشلی جو ہیں، انہوں نے آواز بھی اٹھائی ہے، اور اٹھانی چاہیے، ڈرنا بھی نہیں چاہیے، کیونکہ ایک ریئل سٹوری ہے، ایک حقیقت ہے جس کو ہم چھپا نہیں سکتے، اور ہمیں باقی کمیونٹی کے لیڈر جو ہیں وہ نہیں ڈرتے، وہ آواز اٹھاتے ہیں۔ ہمارے لیڈر بھی، ان کو بھی آواز اٹھانی چاہیے، اور بغیر کسی خوف کے۔
ٹھیک ہے مرزا بھائی، آواز اٹھانے کے بارے میں پھر تھوڑی سی بات کریں گے، آخر میں اس کو ٹچ کریں گے، لیکن غزہ اس وقت بہت نیڈ میں ہے۔ ان کو فائنینشیل ہیلپ چاہیے، ان کو کھانے پینے کے لیے ہیلپ چاہیے، ان کو میڈیکل امداد چاہیے۔ آپ ڈائریکٹر ہیں وی آر کمیونٹی کے، اور ڈکسی الیکٹرانکس پہ ان کے ساتھ آپ نے ایک بہت خوبصورت اور ایک کامیاب ایونٹ کروایا تھا دسمبر میں لاسٹ ایئر۔ اس ایونٹ کے بارے میں لوگوں کو پلیز کچھ بتائیں کہ آپ کا گول کیا تھا، وہ ایونٹ کیوں کروایا تھا، وہ فنڈز کیسے فلسطین اور غزہ تک پہنچ رہے تھے، تھوڑی سی ڈیٹیل بتائیں گے پلیز؟
وہ ہوا یہ تھا کہ میرے دوست جو ٹیکسی اپلائنسز کے ہیں، سلیم چودھری صاحب، ان کا برتھ ڈے تھا، اور کچھ میرے دوست عمرہ کر کے آئے تھے، تو میرے گھر میں بیٹھے ہوئے تھے ہم لوگ۔ وہ ایک چھوٹا سا میں نے ایونٹ ارینجمنٹ کیا تھا، تقریباً 20-25 دوستوں کا۔ تو اسی دوران بیئر کمیونٹی کا جو ہمارے دوسرے پارٹنر ہیں، دوست ہیں، انہوں نے کہا کہ ہمیں بلڈ ڈرائیو کرنا چاہیے، یا کوئی فوڈ ڈرائیو، یا کیا کرنا چاہیے، کوئی آئیڈیا۔ تو اس وقت آئیڈیا میرے دوست سلیم چودھری صاحب کا تھا کہ ہم لوگ غازہ کے لیے کچھ کریں۔ تو مجھے وہ آئیڈیا اچھا لگا، ہم سب دوستوں کو وہ آئیڈیا اچھا لگا۔ ہم سب دوست اسی جگہ پہ بیٹھے ہوئے، میرے گھر میں ہی بیٹھے ہوئے، ہم لوگوں نے اسی وقت $5000 اکٹھا کر لیا۔ تو اس سے ہمارا حوصلہ بڑھ گیا، تو ہم نے یہ پلان کیا کیوں نہ اس کو بڑے پیمانے پہ کیا جائے، کسی اچھی جگہ پہ، کسی بینکوٹ ہال میں، کسی کمیونٹی سینٹر میں۔ تو پھر ہم نے ڈیسائیڈ کیا اتاق بینکوٹ ہال میں کیا لاسٹ ایئر 13 دسمبر، اور ہمیں اس کی امید نہیں تھی کہ کیونکہ اسی دن بہت سارے ایونٹ تھے، پلس دسمبر بریک تھی، اس کی چھٹیاں بھی تھیں، پلس بہت سارے ڈونیشن ہو رہے تھے، تو لگ رہا تھا کہ ریسیشن بھی ہے، ریسیشن تھا، ابھی بھی ہے، تو لگ رہا تھا کہ ہم لوگ ہو سکتا ہے $30-40 تک پہنچ پائیں۔ لیکن اللہ کا کرم ایسا ہوا کہ ہم اس دن $200,000 تک پہنچ گئے، اور وہ ہمارے لیے بہت بڑا آنر ہے۔ اور ہم نے وہ اقنا کے ذریعے کیا تھا، کیونکہ ہماری جو آرگنائزیشن ہے وہ انٹرنیشنل لیول پہ ہم لوگ رجسٹر نہیں ہیں, کام نہیں کرتے, ہم لوکل ہیں. تو ہم نے اکنا ریلیف کے ذریعے وہ ہم نے جو ارینجمنٹ کیا, اور اکنا ریلیف کا جو مین اس وقت جو ایجنڈا تھا وہ تھا کہ وہاں پہ ٹینٹ ہاسپٹل بنایا جائے, کیونکہ بلڈنگیں تو ساری ڈسٹرائر ہو چکی تھی. اور یہ ہمارے لیے بہت بڑا آنر ہے کہ ہم اس پروگرام میں الحمدللہ مدد خدا, تو یہ ایک بہت آنر ہے. میں
مرزا بھائی, اللہ تعالیٰ آپ کو اس کا اجر دے, جنہوں نے ڈونیشن دیا اللہ تعالیٰ اس کو قبول کرے, اور اللہ تعالیٰ واقع میں ہی وہ جو فنڈز ہیں ان کو ذریعہ بنائے مشکل حالات میں لوگوں کی مدد کرنے کا. لیکن ایک بہت اہم سوال ہے, ابھی ڈیوڈ سے بھی ہم بات کر رہے تھے تو ہم نے تھوڑا سا اس کو ٹچ کیا ہے. لابنگ بہت اسٹرانگ ہے ان کی, وہ اپنے حق میں فیصلے بھی کرواتے ہیں. کینیڈا میں بہت بڑی پاپولیشن ہے مسلمانوں کی, ہم بنسبت شاید تعداد میں ایونچولی اگر اب نہیں ہے تو زیادہ ہو جائیں گے, لیکن لابنگ اتنی اسٹرانگ نہیں ہے ہماری. اس کی کیا وجوہات ہے, اور پاکستانی ڈائسپورا اس کے لیے کیا کر سکتا ہے؟
بہت اچھی ہے, بہت اچھا کوشچن ہے یہ. مجھے لگتا ہے جو مین چیز ہے, ہم میں یونٹی نہیں ہے ہماری کمیونٹی میں, جو کہ ہونی چاہیے. میں نے دیکھا کہ باقی سب کمیونٹی کی یونٹی ہے, وہ کوئی بھی چیز ان میں ہوتی ہے تو وہ ایک آواز ہو کے اٹھتے ہیں اور رجسٹ کرتے ہیں. ہمارا پرابلم یہ ہے کہ ہم میں لیڈر زیادہ ہیں, کمیونٹی کم ہے. یہ افسوس کی بات ہے, اور یہی وجہ ہے کہ ہم لوگ جب کوئی کچھ کرنا چاہتا ہے تو ہم لیگ پولنگ میں لگ جاتے ہیں. تو اس ایسے معاملے میں نے دیکھا کہ ہمیں جو چاہیے, کیونکہ اب الیکشن بھی دوبارہ آ رہے ہیں, تو ہمیں چاہیے کہ جو بھی جس کو بھی ہم ووٹ دیتے ہیں, چاہے وہ ضروری نہیں ہے کہ اپنا ہی لیڈر ہو. آپ فار ایگزامپل کسی اور کمیونٹی کا لیڈر چوز کرتے ہیں تو اس پہ آپ اس کو کنونس کریں کہ ہماری ڈیمانڈ کیا ہے. ہم نے یہ نہیں کہ آپ خاموشی سے ان کو ووٹ دے دیں اور بعد میں کہیے آپ جو بھی کر رہے ہیں ٹھیک کر رہے ہیں. آپ بولڈ ہوں, آپ میں ہمت ہونی چاہیے کہ میں نے آپ کو بنایا ہے.
یعنی جو بھی کینڈیڈیٹ ہے, جو بھی آپ کے دروازے پہ آ کے کینویسنگ کے لیے دستخط دیتا ہے, یا آپ جس کے لیے کام کرتے ہیں, والنٹیئر کرتے ہیں کہ یار ہم تمہیں سپورٹ کر رہے ہیں, ان کو آن دا گو بتائیں کہ یار فلسطین از اے سیریس ایشو فار اس, وی نیڈ ٹو ٹاک اباؤٹ غازہ, وی نیڈ ٹو ٹاک اباؤٹ دیٹ کانفلکٹ اینڈ innocent life. Is that the message?
Exactly. کہ ان کو یہی بتائیں کہ آپ ہمارے لیے کیا کریں گے.
صحیح,
کہ یہ ٹائم ہے, ہم آپ کو ووٹ دیتے ہیں, ٹھیک ہے, ہم آپ کے ساتھ ہیں, آپ ہمارے لیے کیا کریں گے.
صحیح,
چاہے وہ جس کمیونٹی سے ہو, وہ لیڈر وہ آپ کی سنے گا اگر آپ ڈیمانڈ رکھیں گے. اگر آپ چپ کر کے پلیٹ میں رکھ کر یا سیلفی لے کر یا بریانی کی پلیٹ کھا کر نو پرابلم میں تو آپ کے ساتھ ہی ہوں, تو پھر یہ چینج نہیں آئے گا, پھر ہماری کوئی لابی نہیں ہے, پھر ہمیں کوئی پہچانے گا نہیں. اور دوسری مین چیز یہ ہے کہ میرے بھائیوں, میرے دوستوں, سب سے مین چیز یہ ہے کہ جب الیکشن آئے نا, ووٹ ڈالنے ضرور جایا کریں, اپنی فیملی کو لے جایا کریں, یہ کاؤنٹ ہوتا ہے. یہ اگر ہم سمجھے کہ میں نے ووٹ ڈال دیا اور میں نے احسان کر دیا, ان کو پتہ نہیں چلتا ہے. یہ تو نہیں پتہ چلے گا کہ کس نے ووٹ کس کو دیا, لیکن یہ ضرور پتہ چلتا ہے کہ کتنے مسلم کمیونٹی کے کتنے ووٹ تھے. تو پلیز الیکشن میں حصہ لیں گے, اپنی ویلیو تبھی بڑھے گی, نمبرز تبھی بڑھیں گے, ہماری تبھی سنی جائے گی کہ ہمارا ووٹ بینک زیادہ ہونا چاہیے.
صحیح. مرزا بھائی, آخری سوال میں ضرور کروں گا ایک, اور مجھے لگتا ہے بڑا ضروری سوال ہے. مسلم کمیونٹی یہاں پہ بہت ہے, فلسطین کے لیے, فلسطین کے حق میں بہت پروٹیسٹ ہوتے رہے ہیں. پاکستانی کمیونٹی اپنا حصہ کیسے ڈال سکتی ہے پروٹیسٹ میں, فنڈنگ میں, اور کیا کیا فیوچر میں کیسے اپنا حصہ ڈال سکتی ہے الیکشن کے علاوہ؟
یہ بہت ہی اچھا کویشچن ہے آپ کا. اور کل ریلی ہو رہی ہے, کل ٹورانٹو میں, تو میں وہاں پہ جا رہا ہوں, اور میں سب
ریلی کا ٹائم اور لوکیشن بتائیں گے پلیز؟
یہ 3:30 بجے کی ہے. ابھی مجھے
سنڈے مارچ 23 3:30 PM. کہاں پر؟
یہ لوکیشن تو مجھے ابھی زبانی یاد نہیں ہے, لیکن میں آپ کو شیئر کروں گا جو انفارمیشن ہے, میں نے اپنے سوشل میڈیا پہ بھی شیئر کیا ہوا ہے. تو یہ کل 3:30 بجے ہے, ہمیں جانا چاہیے. پھر میں اس میں ایڈ کروں گا کہ جب بھی میں نے کوئی بھی پروٹیسٹ دیکھا ہے, ریلیز دیکھی ہیں, ہماری کمیونٹی وہاں نظر نہیں آتی. تو ہم لوگ ہیں کہ اپنے صوفے پہ بیٹھ کے یا کاؤچ پہ بیٹھ کے ہم لوگ چاہتے ہیں کہ تبدیلی آ جائے سوشل میڈیا کے ذریعے. ایسے نہیں آتی, ہمیں باہر نکلنا چاہیے. ہمیں باہر ان دوستوں میں, ان لوگوں میں جو اپنا ٹائم نکالتے ہیں, ایون نان مسلم میں نے دیکھے ہیں بہت زیادہ ہوتے ہیں جن کا کنسرن ہی نہیں ہے. اور ہمارا مین کنسرن ہونا چاہیے, ہمیں ہونا چاہیے باہر, وہاں پر ان کے ساتھ, لیکن ہم لوگ نہیں نکلتے. سو پلیز یہ ضرور باہر نکلیں, اور سوشل میڈیا پہ بھی آپ جو کر سکتے ہیں, میں وہ بھی پارٹ ادا کرنا چاہیے. دوسری بات یہ بھی ہے کہ جب کوئی, سلمان بھائی یہ بڑا اچھی چیز میں آپ کو بتانا چاہتا ہوں کہ جب کوئی پوسٹ لگاتا ہے نا, یا میں لگاتا ہوں, آپ لگاتے ہیں, جو ظلم ہو رہا ہے, جو مظالم ہو رہے ہیں, تو اس پہ کوئی 2-3 بندے ہمت کر کے صرف لائک کریں گے, ٹھیک ہے, ہمیں کس چیز کا ڈر ہے؟ کیا ہوئے گا؟ ہمارا اکاؤنٹ بند ہو جائے گا. یار کم از کم ہم یہ تو کہہ سکیں گے اللہ سبحانہ تعالیٰ کو کہ ہم نے اپنا, یہ ہمارے بس میں یہ تھا, ہم نے یہ کیا,
جتنی ہماری کیپیسٹی ہے اتنا کام کیا.
اور آپ جیسے میں نے پہنا ہوا ہے, آپ بھی پہن سکتے ہیں, میں نے ہر جگہ پہ پہنا ہے, مجھے کوئی ڈر نہیں ہے. میں میئر کے ساتھ ہوں, یا کسی ایم پی کے ساتھ ہوں, ایم پی پی کے ساتھ ہوں, کونسلر کے ساتھ ہوں, جہاں پر بھی ہوں, گورنمنٹ کی بلڈنگ میں جہاں پر بھی, کیا ہوئے گا؟ زیادہ سے زیادہ نکال دیں گے. لیکن میں نے یہ پہنا ہوا ہے نا, تو یہ ایک جرت ایسی جرت کریں, کوئی نہ کوئی چیز ضرور کریں جو آپ کے بس میں. فنڈ دیں, جو آرگنائزیشن جو ہیں جو کام کر رہی ہیں, وہ جو کنیکٹڈ ہیں غزہ کے ساتھ, ان کو فنڈ دیں. اب رمضان کا مہینہ ہے, بڑھ چڑھ کر ویسے بھی زکوٰۃ نکالنی ہے, یہ چیریٹی دینی ہے, تو یہ اس وقت جو ہے ان بھائیوں کی ضرورت ہے, ان کو دیں. تو اس طریقے سے آپ بہت اپنا پارٹ ادا کر سکتے ہیں جو بھی آپ کے بس میں ہے.
ٹھیک ہے مرتضیٰ بھائی, بہت شکریہ جانے کے لیے, آپ نے وقت نکالا. آئی ایم شیور کہ ویورز کو بھی یہ پروگرام بہت اچھا لگے گا. کوئی لاسٹ میسج جو سیدھا آپ ویور سے بات کر کے دینا چاہتے ہو, کوئی میسج آپ کے مائنڈ میں؟ آپ نے باتیں تو بہت کر دی ہیں, تقریباً سبھی میسج ہیں, تو کوئی خاص میسج جو ویورز کو آپ کل کے ایونٹس کے بارے میں اگر بتانا چاہتے ہیں, کوئی بھی میسج آپ دینا چاہیں تو پلیز, کیمرا اینڈ مائک از آل یورز.
تھینک یو سلمان بھائی. میں یہ کہوں گا کہ پلیز جو بھی آرگنائزر ہے اس کا, میں نے تو نہیں دیکھا, اس کا نام ہے القدس ڈے, ٹھیک ہے,
القدس ڈے.
ہاں, اس پہ بہت سارے لوگ آئیں گے, اور اس میں آپ بھی حصہ لیں, فیملی کے ساتھ آئیں, سب آئیں. ہو سکتا ہے کہ اللہ سبحانہ تعالیٰ کو یہی ہماری کاوش, یہی ہماری چھوٹی سی کوشش, اللہ سبحانہ تعالیٰ اس کو قبول کر لے. جیسے آپ کو جو ابراہیم علیہ السلام کا واقعہ یاد ہے, میں یہ تو نہیں کہوں گا کہ ابابیل نے کہا تھا کہ اللہ سبحانہ تعالیٰ نیتوں کو دیکھتا ہے, میری جو کیپیسٹی ہے, جو کیپیبلٹی ہے, جو میرے اوقات ہیں, اسی کے مطابق میں نے یہ پانی کا چھوٹا سا قطرہ پھینکا ہے آگ بجھانے کے لیے. تو میں یہی کہوں گا کہ ہم لوگ جو بھی ہمارے بس میں ضرور کریں, باہر نکلیں, اپنا حصہ ضرور شامل کریں اس میں. تھینک یو.
تھینک یو سو مچ مرتضیٰ بھائی, آج جوائن کرنے کے لیے, وقت نکالنے کے لیے.
ویلکم بھائی, تھینک یو. پتہ نہیں.
ناظرین, یہ تھی آج کی ایپیسوڈ فیس دا فیکٹس ود سلمان کے ساتھ. امید کرتا ہوں آپ کو پسند آئے گی. بہت بار ایسے ہوتا ہے کہ جب میں وہ کانٹینٹ دیکھتا ہوں, جب خبر آتی ہے کوئی بھی غزہ کے حوالے سے, فلسطین کے حوالے سے, میں بے بسی اور لاچاری کا شکار ہوتا ہوں. مجھے سمجھ نہیں آتی کہ میں کیا کروں. بٹ ہم, جیسے ابھی مرتضیٰ بھائی نے کہا, جیسے اس سے پہلے رابی ڈیوڈ نے کہا, ڈو سم تھنگ, ڈو اینی تھنگ. ہم اپنی اپنی کیپیسٹی میں جو کر سکتے ہیں, کم سے کم ہمیں اپنا حصہ ضرور ڈالنا چاہیے. اگر آپ کو انفارمیشن چاہیے, آپ مجھ سے رابطہ کر سکتے ہیں. میں آپ کو مرتضیٰ جویا صاحب سے اور رابی ڈیوڈ سے کنیکٹ کروا سکتا ہوں, تاکہ آپ اپنا حصہ ڈالنے میں, اگر وہ لوگ آپ کی مدد کر سکے تو ضرور ڈالیں. میں ہوں آپ کا دوست, آپ کی آواز, سلمان ارشد. السلام علیکم.